Good morning, my fellow FINEX members and guests. Welcome to the Ayala-FINEX Finance Summit entitled Reimagining the Future, Leading Through the Unknown. This webinar is brought to you by FINEX Professional Development Committee in partnership with Ayala Corporation. Now on its fifth year, the Ayala-FINEX Finance Summit is designed to bring together finance practitioners, business executives, and thought leaders for a discussion on the latest management concepts and business trends to provide CFOs and those aspiring to move on to broader operating roles with the tools to deal with the diverse and evolving needs and expected of them. More importantly, it hopes to provide an opportunity for our members to gain insights from successful CEOs and CFOs on how best to deal with the emerging challenges and opportunities that come with their responsibilities. This morning's session is the first in a series of talks that will delve on a topic that has defined business thinking over the last couple of years, given the rapid changes in the environment that have transformed the way businesses are conducted in this volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. These changes have caused massive disruption in business models and have forced companies to reinvent themselves or face obsolescence. Today's COVID-19 pandemic has further exacerbated the situation and has accelerated this pace of change and transformation in ways no one could have ever imagined. Navigating through these uncertainties and challenges and adapting to this next or new normal in a low-touch economy has put tremendous pressure on businesses who now need to recalibrate their strategies and plans as they pursue the path towards economic recovery. We will start today's session with an opening prayer to be followed by the singing of the national anthem. Please bow your heads and join me as we recite our opening prayer. Father God, all glory, honor, and blessing, all power and might, all praise and thanksgiving be to you, Abba, Father, to us all. We stand on your word, declaring that when we call upon you, you will answer us and be with us in distress. Our deliverer and healer, we seek your protection for our families and all of us from the scourge of COVID-19 and all manner of disease and affliction. We pray especially for our health workers who tirelessly perform their duties at great risk to themselves. We pray for all of us co-workers in the business community that we may perform our tasks with greater diligence in these difficult times to serve each other and our country in solidarity and spirit of social responsibility. We pray for all those in authority in government and the private sector that they may have all wisdom, competence, and strength to lead us and serve through this period of crisis with special attention to our poor and disadvantaged brethren who are struggling to survive. We pray for reconciliation and peace among all Filipinos as we come to better realize our oneness as people in good times and bad, as a common thread unites us. So in an acknowledgement of our dependence on you and in obedience, we approach you, Father God, humble ourselves and pray, seek your presence and turn from our evil ways, that you may listen from heaven, forgive our sins, and revive our land. In the loving name of your Son, Jesus, we pray. Amen. Thank you. May I now call on our FINEX President and CFO and VP for Finance and Treasurer of Philippine Shell Foundation or Petroleum Corporation, Mr. Jose Jerome Jeng Pascual III, for his opening remarks. Jeng.
Thank you very much, Jimmy. Good morning, FINEX colleagues, our friends from Ayala, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 5th Annual Ayala-FINEX Finance Summit entitled Reimagining the Future, Leading Through the Unknown. Brought to you by the Ayala Corporation and the Financial Executives Institute of the Philippines and organized by the FINEX Professional Development Committee. Over the past 6 months, we have heard people say, we are living in unprecedented times, we don't know what the future holds, or we are facing a crisis of uncertainty. Indeed, no one can accurately predict the future, but I believe we can all certainly prepare for it. The company I work for is part of a global multinational corporation that has been at the forefront of scenario planning. Over the last 50 years, the Global Shell Scenarios team has been exploring critical uncertainties of the future and asking the what-if questions that encourage leaders to expand their perspectives and consider what the team calls alternative memories of the future. We have developed a number of long-term scenarios spanning many decades ahead, beyond current realities, looking at global megatrends, bringing different understanding and perspectives into a coherent whole. These scenarios are not predictions of the future, but rather future alternative possibilities that are discussed and developed with governments, think tanks, and other interested stakeholders to inspire new insights and bring them to life through the thinking and actions of leaders and key decision makers. It is then that those future possibilities become promising realities. In the Philippines, we also have highly admired corporations that take a long-term view on the economic prospects and growth potential of the country, that look beyond the current unknowns, develop their own scenarios, and are transforming their businesses in order to thrive in a yet uncertain future. We are very privileged to have with us this morning a very much respected and globally recognized Filipino business leader who is at the helm of the Ayala Corporation and is reimagining the future of the Ayala Group. I'm very pleased to welcome Mr. Jaime Augusto Zobel de Ayala, our keynote speaker for today's summit. He is joined by a distinguished panel of reactors, respected business and finance leaders themselves, who are also my esteemed FINEX colleagues. Ms. Gemma Chang, COO, CFO, and Treasurer of the House of Investments Incorporated. Ms. Arlene May Guevara, Chief Investment Officer of Philam Life. And Mr. Wilson Tan, Chairman and Managing Partner of SGV & Company, Ernst & Young Philippines. The discussion and open forum will be moderated by the well-known, seasoned broadcast journalist and Executive Director of the Makati Business Club, Mr. Coco Alcuaz. At this point, I wish to thank the PDC Chair, Ned Guseco, Liaison Director Omar Cruz, Past President Jimmy Ismael, the Professional Development Committee, and the FINEX Secretariat for organizing this 5th Ayala-FINEX Finance Summit in partnership with the Ayala Corporation. And I would like to thank all of you for being with us today. I wish you all an insightful and enlightening forum, one that could help inspire us to reimagine and actualize a bright and hopeful future for the Filipino. Please continue to take care of yourselves and each other.
Thank you, Jeng. Before I introduce our keynote speaker for today, let me advise everyone that if you have any question, you may use the Q&A button, which can be found at the bottom of your screen. The moderator will cover them during the open forum. Our guest speaker today is Mr. Jaime Augusto Sobel de Ayala, or JASA as many call him. He's the Chairman and CEO of Ayala Corporation. There is no better person than JASA to talk about reimagining the future, as the company he heads is the oldest business house in the Philippines, having successfully navigated the many challenges brought by the years since its formation, as well as the disruptions since the 1800s, by continuously reinventing itself and pioneering the future through the many firsts that the company has introduced in its various business undertakings. JASA holds the following positions in publicly listed companies: Chairman of Globe Telecom, Integrated Microelectronics, Bank of the Philippine Islands, and Vice Chairman of Ayala Land, Manila Water, and AC Energy Philippines. He is also the Chairman of Ayala Retirement Fund, AC Industrial Technology Holdings, AC Ventures, AC Infrastructure Holdings, and Asiacom Philippines Incorporated. Co-Chairman of Ayala Foundation and Ayala Group Club, Director of Alabang Commercial Corporation, Ayala International Private Limited, AC Energy, Ayala Healthcare, Light Trail Manila Holdings, and AG Holdings. Outside of the Ayala Group, he is a member of various business and socio-civic organizations in the Philippines and abroad, including the JP Morgan International Council, JP Morgan Asia Pacific Council, and Mitsubishi Corporation International Advisory Council. He sits on the board of the Singapore Management University and on various advisory boards of Harvard University, including the Global Advisory Council, HBS Board of Dean's Advisors, and HBS Asia Pacific Advisory Board, which he chairs. He is Chairman Emeritus of the Asia Business Council, a member of the Global Board of Advisor of the Council on Foreign Relations, and co-vice chairman of the Makati Business Club, chairman of Endeavor Philippines, and board member of Eisenhower Fellowships. He was awarded the Presidential Medal of Merit in 2009, the Philippine Legion of Honor with rank of Grand Commander in 2010, and the Order of Mabini with rank of Commander in 2015 by the President of the Philippines in recognition of its outstanding public service. In 2017, he was recognized as a United Nations Sustainable Development Goals pioneer by the UN Global Compact for his work in sustainable business strategy and operations. The first recipient of the award from the Philippines, he was one of the 10 individuals recognized for championing sustainability in the pursuit of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals in business. He graduated with a BA in Economics, cum laude, from Harvard College in 1981 and obtained an MBA from Harvard Graduate School of Business in 1987. Ladies and gentlemen, I now present to you Mr. Jaime Augusto Sobel de Ayala.
Thank you very much, Jimmy, for that very kind introduction. Also to Jen Pascual of FINEX, thank you kindly for this invitation. To all the members of the board of FINEX, to the different panelists, Coco, pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much. You know, I have to congratulate all of you as well at FINEX. You know, I'm being a little bit more self-reflective during this COVID crisis, and I'll be hitting my 40th year in Ayala next year, 2021. And when I look back, FINEX, I think, was one of the first institutions I joined in the early years as I began to rise in the company. And I have to say that a lot has to be said about FINEX's evolution, its constant reinvention of itself, its relevance, I guess, to the financial community and for the values that it has stood for. I guess over these years, we find ourselves at MBC aligned always with FINEX's view of the world. And I just want to congratulate the whole team also at FINEX for that everything, I guess, that you have done to keep the institution alive and keep it relevant to our country and its needs. Thank you again for this invitation. Delighted to be a part of it. I think this whole idea of reimagining the future and leading through the unknown is just so relevant at a time like this. I mean, this pandemic in many ways took us partly by surprise, and then has really extended far longer than I guess many of us expected. And so many things are changing all at the same time. Consumer attitudes, behavioral patterns are beginning to shift, and what we thought were just first touch points actually are becoming, you know, hardened new behavioral patterns in everything that's taking place. It's really an unprecedented time. I don't think we've seen anything like this. Once upon a time, we were used to events that would affect us nationally, but the rest of the world was continuing the way it did. And here we are with the whole world facing a similar predicament, with a massive shift, I guess, in the way businesses are run, the way revenues are earned, and a massive disruption, I guess, in the way we all do things. So very, very uncertain. And of course, with that uncertainty comes a much higher level of fear and anxiety over having to deal with all of this. So to a certain extent, I think as one begins to chart a path at a time like this, you know, one takes some inspiration, I guess, from the past, from people who were faced with uncharted territories and looked for the kind of guideposts that they sought to. I'm currently reading a book by Simon Winchester, a British historian, and the one I'm reading right now is about the people who charted paths across the United States in the mid-1800s. Lewis and Clark, who first opened up a route through the middle of the United States from the East Coast to the West, and then the railroads that started to get built in the mid-1800s crossing the USA. And they had to deal with massive uncertainty. They didn't know what route to take. There were no maps at the time. They had to deal with a lot of indigenous tribes, American Indians, as they walked through. They had to deal with problems, both technical in nature, social in nature, and weather patterns. And in many ways, what we face now is not dissimilar. You know, we have to deal with the unknown in a way that is unprecedented. But I do believe that there are ways of marking a step rather than be driven by fear. One can pay close attention to signals and signs that help you lead a company at a time like this, and hopefully result in stability and steady growth while making, I guess, a meaningful impact at a time like this. To a certain extent, over the last few months, stakeholder centricity has been paramount for the Ayala Group. We've been investigating many clues and conducting comprehensive empirical and anecdotal information. We're trying to get as many data points as possible at a time like this to make the right decision and not leave it all to gut feel. And in parallel, we've harnessed the data that we've started to gather to lay the foundations for this reimagining and this transformation. So we're using data more intelligently, I like to think, than we've ever done before. And we're looking at indicators, both anecdotal, real, scientific, to start mapping out, I guess, a picture of this changing environment, and then hopefully chart a path within it that makes sense and that is scientifically sound. I guess this data-informed and discovery-driven reimagination really started as the country was nearing the end of its enhanced community quarantine last May. We began to change, you know, the way we worked, rather than just stick to the way we did things before. We compressed our usual 5-year planning process that was due to start this year in favor of a shorter horizon, far shorter, in fact. 2 months after lifting the quarantine, we focused on that period to stabilize our companies, and extended this planning period to 6 months to prepare ourselves for transformation as we move towards a pre-vaccine, post-COVID future. And to a certain extent, this whole stakeholder centricity, this discovery-driven approach to planning, I think is just absolutely critical in any attempt to reimagine the future. Deeply embedded in this framework, I'll break it up into 3 areas which I believe reimagination is greatly needed, especially, I guess, at this time. First, and the key point is we need to rethink how we reach our consumers. The way we did things in the past perhaps will no longer be relevant in the near future and in the longer future. Second, I do believe we need to redesign our employees' working arrangements and how we operate our companies. We've been used to doing things in the same way for quite a period of time now. I think those standards, that way of behaving, that way of interacting, that way of working will no longer be as relevant in the future. And finally, number 3, and I'll go through each of these a little bit more in detail, I think we need to revisit our commitment as a private sector group to the broader community that surrounds us. So maybe let's just go through these 3 areas and give some examples from our experiences within the Ayala Group. Hopefully, it kind of reignites thoughts on your front. I think this is a time where sharing is massively useful to all of us. We learn from each other. We see how we're all tackling problems within the Ayala Group itself, among our peer executives. We find time, or we try to find time as much as we can to keep sharing as to how we're all adjusting. And a lot of it is from taking these touch points across different industries and seeing how we can adjust to, I guess, bringing those pain points down in our social setting, in our business setting, and this opportunity to reinvent ourselves. If one looks at it that way, this becomes an exciting exercise rather than a painful one, and one full of uncertainty. So maybe just going through those 3 points. The first one, rethinking how we reach our customers. I guess this whole pandemic, I think it's no secret, has accelerated the shift towards digital technologies. Anyone not looking to digitize, I guess, their industry and the companies that they work in is going to be the loser. Our various touch points within the Ayala Group have allowed us to see broad trends and changing preferences among consumers. We keep measuring them much more accurately and much more intensely than we have in the past. Many of our customers have steadily migrated and gotten used to more digital ways of transacting, buying products, and accessing services. And this shift, as one big example, has really been very prevalent in financial services, in e-commerce, and in healthcare. I mean, these are just touch points, but to give you some statistics, for financial services, the pandemic has been a major inflection point for digital adoption. 81%, for example, of BPI's transactions, Bank of the Philippine Islands, are now done online, on online channels from about 71% before the quarantine. Transaction volume via the BPI app also grew by 118%, while platform enrollments increased by 125. People are moving in big ways to these digital platforms. To a certain extent, on the GCash side, this is the telco side, total users doubled over the quarantine period, and transaction volume also doubled in June this year alone, just compared to pre-quarantine levels. We also have e-commerce investments in our portfolio. One of them, Zalora, which you all probably are aware of, has seen transaction volumes exceeding pre-quarantine levels already at this stage. And as we move towards expanding Zalora's goods and services, we just rode with it and used the platform to start bringing other products and services to ride on it as people turn more and more to e-commerce as an option. For Ayala Malls, my goodness, that's a brick and mortar center of activity. We've recently launched ANA, our Ayala Malls Neighborhood Assistant, as our way of adjusting and keeping the malls relevant at a time like this. And of course, we're also providing marketing support to our mall merchants, but also trying to adjust to this changing environment. So a traditional bricks and mortars environment, and we're doing everything we can to start getting it to bridge, I guess, into this e-commerce environment. We've also seen a similar digital shift in healthcare. It's an area that we've been putting capital into for some time now, and my goodness, the changes there are also quite significant. Very recently, AC Health, our healthcare arm, and Globe's 917 Ventures, an arm of Globe Telecom, where they're trying to reinvent new industries, I guess, that touch the telco landscape, have come together and created an integrated telemedicine platform, for example. During its pilot phase in May, Health Now was able to match about 11,000 consultation requests with an active pool of doctors. And the Health Now app is now currently available in both Android and app. And it's trying to bridge that gap for people to be able to access advice and eventually medicines and on-demand consultations online rather than having to physically go to a location. So these are some of the areas where we're also trying to adjust some of the services that we currently have and turn them onto the online space to make them more inclusive in certain ways and more relevant, I guess, to the needs of clients at this time. So in many ways, the pandemic, while a negative issue in and of itself, has opened up new possibilities that both consumers and companies may not have previously realized are possible. And it's also widening the scope of the customer world that they can interact with. So that this shift towards digital, this preference for seamless transactions and purchases, and the increased focus on health and wellness, I believe these are trends that won't change as we move on. They're part and parcel of our lives now, and they're going to get sticky. I think there will be a new way of how we see ourselves, our health, and the interaction we have with many communities. And to a certain extent, if you reflect on the formation of what we call Globe 917, it was an independent team, and this might be relevant to all of you, that we put up in Globe to basically look at how the evolution was beginning to take place in industries that were touched upon by the telco industry and by the digitization of many products and services. We put a whole group of people around it. We provided specific leadership precisely to get them out of traditional ways of thinking and get them focused on reinventing whole new industries that were affected or rode on the telco infrastructure that we have. So one idea, I guess, for all of you is, sometimes you can't use the existing organization for that reinvention. Perhaps you've got to create independent groupings within your institutions to think things through and reinvent themselves. But there's a lot now that can be used in the infrastructure that we have now in the country to do that. And we all have to adjust to the changing nature of the way customers are behaving right now. I mean, just take the malls in particular within our group. Only about 20 to 25% of the volume of people that entered our malls in the past are currently re-entering. That's a very much lower number because people are either scared, they can't get transportation. So you can't sit back and just complain. You have to adjust to that changing nature. And some of the reinvention that's taking place in our malls group, I gave some hints about it earlier, are part and parcel of our adjustment to that. It's useless to sit back and say, I wish the world wasn't like this. The world is changing and we all have to adjust to it. And so that's the way it works on the way we're beginning to analyze the customer with far more detail. As I move to the second point, the redesigning of how we work and operate, this is going to affect, again, all of us. We have to really see how this digital transformation is affecting the way all of us communicate and work. I guess more important than having new tools and gadgets is institutionalizing, I guess, among our employees, a new mindset of agility, of curiosity, of experimentation. The way things worked before won't be the way things work again in the future. And so there has to be that flexibility in the kind of people that we have to be able to adjust to that uncertainty and then hopefully thrive within it. So to a certain extent, these big changes are happening, and to a certain extent, we've forced, I guess, significant progress as well in our own digital transformation as an institution, and as we look forward. To be frank, we started on the digitization journey some time back. We came up with a framework, the one that you see, I guess, in the screen in front of you, back in mid-2019. That was our first pass at this, and there have been major developments in this journey as we proceeded, including the establishment of our AC Analytics. I've mentioned that analytics have become part and parcel of the way we're trying to create more data-driven decisions and more scientifically based decisions as we move forward. So the formation of AC Analytics was part and parcel of our beginning to harness, I guess, more important information on the customers that we were seeking to serve. We put up an active fund. It's close to $200 million fund, precisely to take advantages of shifts that were taking place in the market and new opportunities with these radical shifts in the customer, technology, and industry. And then finally, we have a couple of other ventures that we're beginning to fund to take advantage of the disruption taking place. So to a certain extent, this whole COVID-19, while negative in many ways, is getting us to reinvent the way we work and the way we interact. And to a certain extent, we've had to drastically revisit the way we do things. Like many of you, during the onset of ECQ, and this is back to the work side, we adopted a structured work from home arrangement for the majority of our 50,000 employees group-wide to keep them safe while leveraging online tools to keep everyone engaged. Around 38% of our total workforce continued to work from home as of August 26. We also partnered with online learning platforms, Coursera and Degreed, two internationally renowned institutions, to provide our employees continuing learning and retooling opportunities in both technical and special interest topics. It's just a chance for them to keep learning and adjusting to this changing environment. Our leadership team, myself included, my brother Fernando, TG Lincauco, who's here today, our CFO, and the rest of our group management committee, have also overweighted a lot of communication with our communities of executives and employees at this point in time. There's just a need to really talk through issues at these time of uncertainties. And that's one thing we've been doing significantly more than in the past in this new work environment. And to a certain extent throughout this large scale experiment of utilizing alternative working arrangements, we realized that that actually work flexibility does not necessarily mean a huge drop in productivity. At first, we didn't know how it would move, but to a certain extent, and I think Jimmy Ismail was saying it earlier, it's made us, many of us, much more productive in certain ways and maybe less productive in others. But I think there've been many pluses that have come out of this new way of I guess, reimagining the purpose of the office and how it'll shape the future of work. Of course, the ancillary results from that, even as you well know, we're a major real estate player in the country, and it's making us really rethink how our offices will work, the role of office spaces, and this changing nature for people wanting to live in the suburbs in areas that are environmentally more pollution free as a way of working. And the sales, I guess, within the real estate group are beginning to reflect these changing consumer as well on that. So this whole revisiting of the office is taking place. To illustrate, over the last few months, we've been conducting, I guess, extensive research and consultations on the feasibility of a hybrid work arrangement for our employees and making this relatively permanent in our group. We're applying the principle of outcomes-based evaluation and task-based approach to where work can be done. For example, for tasks that require focus and concentration, such as writing and research, perhaps a work where most productive approach probably would be most productive. Meanwhile, social activities, team meetings, town halls, and tasks that require face-to-face interactions, such as collaborative projects and mentorship, again, should be done in physical offices. But there are ways of splitting all of this up, and we're beginning to think them through in concrete terms rather than just impulsively and in a reactionary way. So reimagining the future of work is just one element, I guess, of this larger digital transformation journey that's beginning to take place. And as it stands, redesigning the relationship between work and the office already requires a high degree of openness, of flexibility, of trust in the institution that you're working for. There is a need for balance in these discussions, particularly in taking into consideration different corporate cultures, the nature of roles and functions, and as well as, of course, government regulation in the field that you're in. And so finally, I move on to a third point. So I talked about the customer effect. I've talked a little bit about the work environment that we have and the changes taking place there. And finally, I think we should all revisit our commitment to and our role in society at a time like this. Massive disruption, manage upheaval, a whole shakeup of the inclusive nature, I guess, of the environment we're in and how many people are getting displaced. And I think all of us within the private sector have to take a new look at our commitment to and role in society. And so among the many challenges that we have in this pandemic is a new kind of anti-establishment movement. We're seeing it globally, and the increasing doubts on the validity of globalization and the capitalist system. Ironically, this is happening, in my opinion, more in the developed world than it is in the developing world. But I think we've been a net winner in the globalization arena. But the developed world, many jobs have been lost to countries like ours. And there's a lot of rethinking about whether the capitalist system is the one that they want to hang their hat on. And amidst these developments, I believe there's no better time than now for all of us in the private sector to seriously revisit, I guess, and renew our commitment to and our role in society. This wasn't always the case in the past, but I believe it is a great opportunity for us to see whether our role should be more engaged than it has been defined in the past. I am a firm believer in the capitalist system. Let me just say that up front. It's created a robust and interconnected ecosystem that has led to increased competitiveness for all of us, better products and services, game-changing innovations, a massive creator of jobs, and I believe a lifting of entire nations out of poverty. It's an extraordinary system. However, as with any system, it is imperfect and can be corrupted if it doesn't have the proper guardrails. I believe that all of us who have found success from the system should also carry a strong sense, perhaps, of responsibility to build and strengthen the institutions that will prevent massive inequities from taking place. I listened to a great talk by former Vice President Al Gore of the US last night. It was organized by GIC, the state fund out of Singapore. And he made an interesting comment. He said, a lot of us measure the success, I guess, of our countries by GNP. And GNP as a measure was really developed by an economist, a Nobel Prize winning economist in the 30s called Kuznets. And this was kind of the pre-Bretton Woods era. And he kind of put it forward as a way of measuring growth. But he said at the time, ironically, GNP should not be seen as the only measurement in seeing whether a country is succeeding or not. It's just one touch point, one measurement. Ironically, even though he said that, GNP is how we measure, I guess, the success of all our nation states now. But I guess Al Gore was putting a proposition on the table. He said maybe we should redefine the measurements of how we look at ourselves and see our success. Is GNP the only measurement? And should there be other measurements that take into account quality of life and the general contribution to the well-being, I guess, of our citizens, rather than just this strict output that can result, that doesn't measure to a certain extent pollution and inequities and many other factors that come. So GNP in and of itself might not be there. And it is maybe a major reason why all of us in the Ayala Group, and a lot of it led by TG Lincauco, have really grabbed onto sustainability measurements as our way of redefining our social contract, I guess, with the greater community. I don't want to dwell on it too much, but I guess this need to broaden our definition of our stakeholder community, the people we're responsible for, particularly looking at segments that are beyond our shareholders and immediate customers, I think is an imperative for all of us at this time, particularly at a time of massive disruption like the one we have now. It's only when we expand our horizons to include broader stakeholder communities around us that we can maintain our organization's relevance and create genuine and sustainable value for all, and of course keep trust alive in our institutions. We don't have to go very far to see this principle come to life. Over the past few months, we've seen broad-based and stakeholder-centric approaches generate meaningful impact with great speed. I don't want to dwell on them too much, but we've seen our engagement purposely expand beyond our traditional constituencies. Just a couple of examples, through AC Health's leadership, we pulled our resources together group-wide to convert Qualimed Hospital in the Valley into a COVID-19 testing and treatment facility for our employees and give them a safe space in case all the hospitals started to close down, where they could be taken care of at a time like this. As a group of companies, we decided this was one way of supporting our ecosystem on the health side. AC Health, a new team that we have, done a great job. We have double degree MBA doctors there that helped us think through all these issues, and they've used their skill sets as well to re-educate other companies that have sought our services. I think Project Ugnayan, another project where we brought together peer groups, an initiative of about 270 private organizations to address a massive pain point. The economically vulnerable in Greater Metro Manila is something that we got very involved in and helped push. And I like to think that ended up helping over 2.8 million families or 14 million individuals. And lastly, we all came together for a COVID-19 response called Task Force T3, which was our way of contributing to revamping, I guess, the whole testing environment in the country. I don't want to dwell on all of these. The main point I guess I'm making is that this is a time where all of us have to come together as peer groups to address pain points. And there's kind of a renewed social contract that I think we all have to develop as private sector groups and be far more engaged in addressing pain points in our society. And that also leads perhaps, and I hope, to more public-private engagement, I guess, across a variety of different fronts, where both the public and private sector start to basically blend and come together in helping address these big pain points that we have. So at the end of the day, I guess revisiting our role and renewing our commitment to a broader set of stakeholders is all about building trust and goodwill within a community. And I think to a certain extent that will lead to an institution's relevance and longevity over time. So let me just emphasize that creating shared value is not just the task of the private sector, but also let me just say that equally important is the role of the public institutions and the role that they play, particularly in establishing an environment that is conducive to business succeeding and giving back to the community. This is a two-way street, and the public sector also has to create a framework that allows us all to do this in a way that is progressive, in a way that is impactful, and in a way that is fair, as we all like to see ourselves. So private institutions, I believe, can do good if they do well. And this requires in many ways a commonality of purpose between peers and partners and progressive policies enacted by the public sector. So bottom line, let me close, and I know we have a panel. I think we have a golden opportunity to actively shape the future that is fast approaching. Leading through the unknown requires reimagination, guided by the many signs and clues around us. There are signs, and if we listen, we use data, and we get a pulse of how things are changing, the world becomes far less uncertain, and we start to see ways that we can begin to shift and change. And in summary, we need to rethink how we reach our consumers. We need to redesign our work and the way our companies operate. And finally, we need to revisit and renew our commitment to our stakeholder communities. I'd like to make, before closing, a last reference. I listened also to a talk given by our former Secretary of Finance, Cesar Purisima. I gave a talk at AIM 2 days ago, and he gave a great talk, giving perspective, I guess, to this whole crisis. What I liked about his talk were many components, but at the end, and I'll quote from him and I take from him, what I liked about his talk is at the very end, he gave some very positive notes of reinvention of where the world is shifting and changing to. And if we embrace it, it creates a whole range of new opportunities that we now have to reinvent ourselves and break out of traditional paradigms. He mentioned 10 points at the end, and I make reference here to what Cesar said. He talked about digitization, which I've talked about remote work, about the green economy and the changes taking place there, about telehealth, about infrastructure investment and public-private partnerships, about education. That's a whole other field that's changing. About ASEAN centrality and supply chain shifts, about the rethinking of our social contracts, something I've touched on, the revisiting of corporate values, and again, as I've said, the changes in consumer behavior, 10 points. I guess what's important about what I'm saying and what Cesar said in his AIM talk is that this is also a time of great opportunity. And if you can get your organizations to look at this as a time of reinvention, then you really have a chance to participate and be relevant to the future. Anyway, thank you very much for this opportunity. I hope this has been useful in some way, and I look forward to our dialogue with the panelists. Thank you again. I hope I didn't go on for too long.
Thank you, Jaime, for the very interesting insight and for sharing with us Ayala Corporation's vision on how to reimagine the future. It's also very, very interesting to note that the group has adopted a very broad definition, looking at the stakeholders rather than on a broader scale rather than just the shareholders. So we will now hear from our panel of reactors on their impressions on our theme for today in our keynote speaker's presentation. Each panelist will have 5 minutes to present their reaction, which will be followed by a panel discussion to be led by our moderator. Let me introduce them all at the same time in the alphabetical order as well as in the sequence of their reaction. Our first panelist is Ms. Gemma Chang. Gemma is the Executive Vice President, Chief Operating Officer, Chief Financial Officer, and Treasurer of House of Investments. Concurrently, she is also the Chief Financial Officer of iPeople Incorporated. House of Investments, as you all know, is the holding company of the Yuchenko Group of Companies for non-bank and non-insurance businesses. iPeople is the education business of House of Investments with Ayala Corporation as a partner. Gemma has a diverse background, having been involved in insurance, banking, education, and real estate with Citibank, Malayan Insurance, and SM Investments as past employers. a magna cum laude in economics graduate of the University of the Philippines in Diliman. She also holds a certificate of special studies in management and administration from Harvard University. Our next panelist after Gemma is Ms. Arlene May Guevara. Ian, as we call him, is AIA Film Life's Chief Investment Officer. She also holds various positions in other organizations within and outside the Film Group. Prior to joining Film Life, she was Deputy Director of the Treasury Department of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, where she spent 14 years in central banking, focusing on reserves management. Ian earned her BS degree in Applied Mathematics, magna cum laude, from the University of the Philippines in Los Baños as an NSDB scholar. She also completed all the academic units for Masteral Studies in Economics from the De La Salle University. She likewise obtained a Master of Policy Science degree from the Graduate Institute of Policy Science in Saitama, Japan, under a Monbushu Scholarship. She currently sits in the board of FINEX and is an active member of the Management Association of the Philippines and the Fund Managers Association of the Philippines. Our last panelist is Mr. Wilson Tan. Wilson is the chairman and country managing partner of SGV & Company. Throughout his career, he has served in various leadership positions in SGV and Ernst & Young. He has extensive experience in financial audits of large companies and is a recognized authority in international financial reporting standards. He is the chairman of the Philippine Interpretations Committee, which assists the Financial Reporting Standards Council of the Philippines in enhancing financial reporting standards in the country. Wilson is an active member of FINEX, MAP, Makati Business Club, and Philippine Institute of Certified Public Accountants, where he received the Outstanding CPA in Public Practice Award in 2009 and a Special Achievement in International Professional Involvement in 2012. A graduate of the University of the East in Manila with a BS degree in Business Administration, summa cum laude, Winston placed 12th in the 1987 CPA Board examinations. He later obtained his MBA from the International Institute for Management Development in Switzerland. He also attended the Pacific Rim Bankers Program, Foster School of Business, University of Washington. To moderate this session, may I introduce Mr. Coco Alcoas. Coco is the Executive Director of the Makati Business Club, and prior to joining MBC, he was Bureau Chief at Bloomberg News, Business News Head, and Anchor at ABS-CBN News Channel, and contributor at Rappler. Let us now hear from our first reactor, Ms. Chang.
Good morning. Can everybody? Okay. COVID-19 has actually made a profound shift in our lives. Today is our new normal, right? We're attending the Ayala-FINEX Finance Summit virtually via Zoom instead of in the ballroom of a hotel. In fact, for most of us, we work from home. Our children study from home. We eat, sleep, and Zoom. The pandemic has accelerated the digitization of services as suddenly we don't want to touch papers and we avoid crowds. Our Mapua schools introduced blended learning a couple of years ago. We had fully online classes during what we called a digital day when typhoons and floods would prevent students from going to class. We also had digital days when there were transport strikes or other city activities that would prevent students from going to school. We also offered fully online class options to students who wanted to avoid the rush hour. So when the government declared a lockdown last March, classes in all Mapua schools continued. The digital days simply became digital days with an S. Digital transformation accelerated. But I don't want you to think that it was like that for all of our schools. Our other schools, APEC, National Teachers College, and the University of Nueva Cáceres, which catered to the affordable student segment, had to rethink how we would reach our students. That meant we needed to hurdle basic patterns such as connectivity challenges, the lack of gadgets, or even simply their ability to pay tuition. And most of all, underlying all of this, we had to teach our teachers how to teach online or offline. The pandemic may have changed people's mindsets and habits, but we still need to understand what our consumers want. In our case, what our students want. Last April, we listened to our students when a Malayan When a Malayan school, the Malayan Colleges Laguna, declared um, about 2 or 3 weeks of no school to give the students a respite from the daily online class. The pressures of class were, we found that the students felt that the daily pressure of day-to-day online classes was too much. And in addition, last May, to prepare for the new school year, we commissioned a coping study on parents and students to gauge how attitudes towards education and schooling are changing, as well as to assess reception towards flexible learning. Our journey doesn't end here. Every day is a work in progress. The future of education is still evolving. Education is not just about academics, and we recognize that and acknowledge the need to redesign our school programs and school activities. There may be a niche market for fully online courses, but we think the future normal will likely be blended learning for tertiary education. We will listen to our customers and we will continue to listen to them because customer psychology will drive market behavior. Thank you.
Our next panelist is Ayan Guevara from Film Life. Ayan.
Hi, thank you, Coco. And good morning to everyone. I hope you're able to hear me well. So I would like to posit my reaction in the form of sharing, how our organization is also doing this reimagination of our future in the areas that were mentioned by Jaza earlier. So first and foremost, I think we have to remember, in whatever industry we are, that the purpose for being shouldn't be lost on everyone. And in our case, being in the life insurance industry, our mission really, or our purpose, and this is, I'm speaking for the whole of AIA, which is our parent company, it is really to promote healthier, longer, and better lives. And in the Philippine case, in Film Life in particular, we really have this mission of really having a policy in the home of every Filipino, but because we see this as a race against risk. Considering the very, very low level of protection and coverage that we are seeing in our population, it's very important that we really do that. And this is really, and that's why we say it's really a race against risk. Now, in terms of the areas that were mentioned by Jazz earlier, in terms of reimagination, first, on rethinking on how we reach our customers. In our particular case, we're really talking about the products or the offerings that we have. And it's very important that we really be relevant to our customers. So it's really going to be covering the whole gamut of products in the entire life cycle. And we shouldn't really just be talking about death or giving benefits when somebody dies, but really giving those benefits while they're alive. And so health and wellness are very, very important components of our industry. And that's why we have our core program of Vitality, which addresses that. So protection, savings, retirement, these are the areas of our products that we are able to give to our customers. And distribution is also something that's very important as we rethink the way we do things. Like, for example, in the conventional distribution of agency, whereas before we would do face-to-face selling, in the new pandemic situation that we have, we are still able to do that by doing online selling. And selling online will not just be pure online, but also virtual. It's not face-to-face, but a virtual kind of communication with our customers. So that's also one way that we are able to do that. And the entire customer experience will really have to be rethought and looking at the different channels where we can have touch points with them all along the entire journey from the time that they think about what to buy in terms of the product and actually purchasing the product and giving after sales service to them all the way to the point when they already make claims. So the entire customer journey will also have to be rethought. In terms of redesigning how we work and operate in our organization, maybe like most other companies, we are also employing work from home right now. And this is something that we've also embraced. I do know that there is a telecommuting act that hasn't really gained traction. But because of this situation that we are in right now, it has kind of forced the issue on us. And we're seeing that we're able to make it work because we have the proper tools, we have the connectivity, and in all probability, the new normal will really be something already very different from what we had in the past, where everyone was really expected to be in the office. There will be new ways, and that maybe the configuration of workspaces will be more towards an agile type of working. And in terms of revisiting and renewing our commitment to our communities, this is another area where resilience and sustainability is a major part of our organization. ESG, environment, social, and governance, are very, very important words in our organization, not just in AIA, but also in Film Life. And pre-COVID, I would say that the greater focus was probably on environment, but more and more with what we are experiencing right now, the S part of it, or social, is gaining more prominence. We have to think of our people, how they're working, those sectors that have been affected, the vulnerable sectors, loss of jobs, and all these things. So it is something that will gain more traction in the coming days ahead. Now, on governance, this is another area which I think we shouldn't really be left out. We are also mindful of following the corporate governance scorecard as advocated by the ASEAN. And in all of these, we think that really sustainability and resilience is the path to go for all companies moving forward. So all of these are enabled by the greater use of technology, going the digital transformation, and also using data analytics to give us more insights on our customers, as well as help us make informed decisions. And underpinning all of this, I would say, is financial discipline, particularly in the case of life insurance, where people entrust their monies to us and where the payouts will happen in the future. It's very important that we practice financial discipline all throughout. And within this kind of discipline, it's also the thing that will allow us to make the proper investments, be it in tools or in technology and in people. And with this kind of investments, that will really enable us to reimagine our future and lead through the unknown. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ian. Our final panelist is Wilson Pan from SGV. Wilson.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Jaime. Coco, just let me know if I'm breaking up. Again, thank you, Jaime, for sharing your insights and strategies on how the Ayala Group of companies is forging ahead to reimagine and reframe the future. I know you have quite a precious time, and thank you for sharing your time with us this morning. But you're spot on that in these challenging and unprecedented times, it is more important than ever for the Philippine business community to share its collective wisdom and learn from each other on how we can all move forward as we reimagine what the future of the working world will be like. Let me start by saying that Ayala's stakeholder-centric approach in navigating this crisis is both practical and indeed inspiring, and your commitment to serving your stakeholders and responding to the changing needs of our country remains steadfast in spite of the very restrictive conditions. And your collaborative, data-driven approach is quite strategic, scientific, and yet very humane and compassionate. One of the most relevant points that our speaker made was to leverage on digital transformation to better reach and engage our customers. In fact, in a recent EY survey, it showed that companies leading in digital transformation were generating significant financial value from technological advancement. These are the companies that are committed to build a transformative culture. And our speaker made good points on how we as business leaders need to identify and adapt to digital and technological platforms to better serve our customers, our clients, particularly in the areas of digital finance, retail, and telemedicines. And these are indeed growth areas for the future. And all of us have seen the exponential usage of digital platforms to move goods, to shop and make financial transactions during this quarantine period. And consumer behavior is changing rapidly, and especially in a very much consumer-led economy like the Philippines, where consumer spending goes, that will basically where the economy will go. And we can expect this trend to continue for the foreseeable future, and digital will likely be the way to drive long-term value for most companies. The challenge, as one of the points also our speaker mentioned, is ensuring a seamless digital experience for clients, a digital customer journey that remains consistent and engaging at every step, from acquisition to conversion, and thereby promoting brand loyalty in the long term. Another significant point that our speaker made is on how we are implementing the future of work in our respective organizations. And I like Ayala's innovation mindset approach. It's an excellent example of how companies can utilize online platforms to ensure people engagement, because in order to keep pace with this uncertain world, values like agility, curiosity, flexibility, trust are crucial, and innovation is the way to enable them. Similarly, we in SGV have leveraged on our operational agility and digital platforms to engage our people and connect with our clients as we deliver services in this time of pandemic and restrictive condition. As early as first week of March, we activated our crisis management team to provide guidance amidst the very fluid and unpredictable circumstances that were unfolding then, to implement safety protocols during the outbreak, including alternative work arrangement, and to oversee the rapid shift in our operations. We tried to come up with a lot of communications internally, even externally, activities to bring back a sense of normalcy and to assuage the growing anxieties among our people. And note that all this happened during the peak of our operations. It's audit busy season. Indeed, this pandemic has required all of us to learn how to manage health risks while reinventing the way we work and operate. And our esteemed speaker said, work flexibility does not necessarily mean a huge drop in productivity. And perhaps the more challenging part, and I heard Jaime also alluded to it also, is given the remote work arrangement, how do we ensure that the company purpose, values, work ethics continue to be embraced and embedded in our hearts, our people's hearts and minds, especially in a firm like SGV, where, as you know, the attrition rate would be high. We'll be hiring a lot of people every year. I also would like to commend our speaker in their swift response in dealing with the immediate impact of COVID-19. I think the Ayala Group's numerous initiatives have made a significant difference in the lives of our fellow Filipinos. Of course, the Ayala Group's commitment to social responsibility is well known, and their wide-scale response to this health crisis, from medical protocols, facilities, to food aid to millions of Filipinos is truly inspiring. I remember one time we sat down with their healthcare group just to gain some insights on how to augment what we are doing in SGV. What I do like is the collaborative approach also taken by the group, partnering with various religious sector and other concerned entities, whether corporations, organizations, families, or individuals. And this demonstrates one key learning about this pandemic, that we're all in this together, that the only way we can overcome this is through our collective will and meaningful action. In closing, I'd like to reiterate our speaker's sentiments on the importance of building a robust ecosystem, wherein the public and private sector must collaborate to develop the right strategies to deal with this pandemic. We can't do it alone. The private sector will do its part as good, responsible, and compassionate corporate citizen, creating goodwill. But we also need the public sector to support us with reliable infrastructure, consistent policies, and conducive business environment. And our speaker is right when we all have an unprecedented opportunity to drive meaningful change and reframe our future, and let us make the most out of it. Again, thank you once again to our speaker, Jaime, for giving us his precious time and insights this morning.
Thank you very much, Wilson, and of course to Ian and to Gemma as well. We have some very good questions here. We have about 20 minutes for this, so I'll go through the questions and I'll try to collapse some of them into each other. Many of the questions, not surprisingly, are about digital, and some participants like Rodora Lugay, Kathy Bachoco, and Teresa Ramos raised similar points there, as did all the panelists. And Gemma, for example, talked about digital days at Mapua, and that's a very interesting idea that I guess semi-prepared them for this. Could I ask first to Jaza, how do you, and all of them talked about not just study from home, but work from home. Could I ask Jaza, and then maybe after that, if Gemma has a comment, I'll turn to her. How do you measure work from home productivity in this kind of environment? What kind of challenges has that posed?
That's a great question. First, Coco, before answering, let me thank Gemma, Arlene, and Wilson for their thoughtful engagements. Each three represent different industries, but the way they look at the problem and the way they look at reinventing their own position within their industries are precisely, I think, the way we should all be adjusting. So thank you to all three for the insightful comments. I think it's in these dialogues that we all learn from each other, and picking up from what you have all said in the insurance business and in the accounting profession and in the educational profession. These are all great ideas that I've taken note of as well. Productivity, that's a very interesting comment, Coco. Actually, my first kind of internal mandate to myself is not to put too much focus on productivity in a moment of great adjustment. I internally, I argued this out more informally with our executive team. Let's not look for perfection at a time like this. This is a time of massive upheaval and great readjustment on people's part. I think productivity should not be, and this is just a very subjective point of view, should not be the key focus at this point in time. I mean, it's too much shift, too much change, and productivity will come at a later stage. But more, I think, important right now is this ability to adjust, to change, and to do it in a healthy way where we are all in a mentally good place. If we add to that an element of productivity right now, particularly with the kind of tensions people must be going through, both at the personal level and at a professional level, I think we might be asking too much from people. So I'll be frank, I have not been pushing the whole idea of productivity. I've been pushing more a desire to see flexibility and adjustment and learning and to a certain extent, a willingness to adjust. Productivity, I think, will come later, and there'll be elements that will also be lost, Coco. I mean, I'm a great believer in human interaction. It's always a pleasure to see you, Coco, at a personal level rather than on screen. And while the screen, as Jaime Ismail said before we started, has given us an opportunity to do so much more in the day, I think we're all human beings that live off cues from people and personal interaction. I gain so much when I'm in a grouping of people and have a chance to dialogue with them. And I learn so much from the combustion and catalytic quality of a team approach. That'll be lost. So productivity has not been high on my list, but intuitively and anecdotally, you can see that time is being used perhaps more productively at a time like this. But I think it's only that way, Coco, because we all kind of know each other to a certain extent already. The teams we're working with are people we already know. I worry a little bit more about the people who we're meeting for the first time. A cold call, a new business interaction, young employees in the organization who you still haven't had a chance to interact with. It's going to be a harder level of trust to be built there. But going back to productivity, I think from a time point of view, it's the only way you can really measure it right now. But productivity in the end is all about results and how we achieve results. And I think it's a little bit early in the game to measure that. But I have to say, I'm not giving that a high priority right now.
Thanks. So that's a direct answer to Rodora Lugay's question about measuring productivity during work from home. You mentioned new customers, new employees, new clients, etc., and how you get a dynamic with them. And Wilson touched on that when he talked about SGV having a high attrition rate because you hire so many every year. And the question that Wilson had posed there was, how do you keep the culture or even inculcate the culture in the new ones? What are you doing on that front, Jaime?
Yeah, I think, Wilson, that's such a valid comment, and one that's going to be relevant to all of us. The one area that I think I have changed my personal behavior, and I'm sure the teams I work with, TG especially here and Jimmy, communication is at a whole different level. Communication is generally there when you run an organization, but over the years you kind of adjust to certain patterns. Then you find some way of dealing with the formal and informal. But I've had to ramp it up significantly. At the start of the crisis, our group Mancom, which used to meet once a month, started to meet daily. I mean, that's a radical approach to communication. And we needed to get a pulse from each other. We needed to get a feel of what was happening on the ground, and we had to learn from each other. We were all working in uncharted territory. And my instinct was, let's meet daily at the end of the day and get a pulse. Of course, we could do it relatively easily because of the virtual nature, but we needed to have this interaction. That, of course, then loosened up. It became twice a week. It's now once a week. This is at the group executive level. And then we basically have town halls, virtual town halls with the organization across Ayala Group once a week now, where anybody can ask any question. We tell them what's happening on the health side and what initiatives we're instituting. I think communication is being made easier, but I think also has to be ramped up at a time of change like this. That would be, I guess, my suggestion.
Thanks very much. Wilson, could I ask you in 1 or 2 minutes to respond to what are you doing to make sure, not so much the guys who are there already, but the guys you're bringing in? You're in mute, Wilson.
Well, it's fortunate that in SGV 3 years ago, we refreshed our purpose. No? As you know, more than 3 years ago, our founder died. So we sort of really refreshing our purpose journey. And we've been communicating a lot on what is our purpose, okay, how do we cascade that to the existing employees, as well as how to onboard the new employees. So we're high on that. But really, there are a lot of, as Jaime said, there are a lot of meetings. I remember during the height of the lockdown, I activated the CMT, the crisis management team. We would meet even sometimes twice a day, any time of day, even weekends, because the crisis management team is really to respond to the current crisis, while my ex-com would respond to how we deliver our service at the time, because it's the peak of the busy season. So I tried to split the role. The crisis management team is to respond to the immediate need, while the business as usual, the ex-com will deliver on our commitments to our clients. But so right now, for the purpose journey, we're initiating new programs like the high performing team, just to make sure that we work in teams cohesively despite of the remote work arrangement. So we have a number of initiatives with respect to driving home and inculcating our purpose to our new employees.
Thanks very much. I'll turn to Gemma, who raised a good point about while Mapua was able to address some digital issues relatively quickly, I guess the more on the affordable education segment, there were more difficulties there. So some kind of digital divide. Could I ask Gemma to elaborate a bit on that, and I'll turn to Jaza to ask how, as the business sector and maybe as a society, we can address that digital divide. Gemma?
Yes. Oh, well,
Gemma, before you answer that, could I ask you, did you also go into a daily session or twice a day?
almost daily.
So Wilson, so far you're the exage one.
We have to have more than 5,000 individuals working at the peak of the busy season, so they're quite anxious at that time. So
that is right. And Phoenix would know that this did hit during reporting season, so that must have been a disaster. That must have been a big challenge for you. Okay, Gemma, go ahead.
It was definitely very challenging, especially at the beginning, because everybody had to contend with, the changes, the arrangements that had to be made when we went on lockdown. And then all the schools, right? So just like Mr. Jasa said earlier, we went through a assessment period, and then what we did was we then analyzed and tried to understand what are the needs and challenges of all the students. And basically, especially when it comes to the CDE market, they don't have the capability. They can't even afford internet, or worse, the gadgets, right? Fortunately, we were able to solve that in different means. We actually came up, our various schools teach in 3 ways: synchronous or asynchronous, or even modular. Modular could mean even the most basic. Remember correspondence courses before? We brought that back again. MTC, for example, provided students the option of coming to school and picking up their schoolwork for those who don't want the hassle of having it couriered to them, or the problem of having it emailed to them. Well, email is obviously an option. It continues to be an option for students who have that capability. One of our schools, University of Nueva Caceres, for example, is even willing to send the student the USB, just so they can go through their lesson plan. It's basically that. But we must recognize that the telecom companies did help. They offered packages for students, like $399 for 10 gigs, things like that. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Gemma. I'll turn to Jaza, and you don't need to restrict yourself to education, Jaime, but this digital divide that is obviously there, how do we as a business community, or even as a society, even begin to address that?
Yeah, it obviously, Coco, the opportunity there to reach far more people from an educational point of view is there. The negative, of course, is it's very reliant on the kind of infrastructure that we have to create for the country. I would view this as a tremendous opportunity. I think the institution that Gemma works for is massively progressive on the educational front. I've just been so impressed. We are joint venture partners, but the way the organization has adjusted and the work they had done prior to COVID in creating an online learning environment that they're now expanding on has been very special. But the only way to really make sure, I guess, that people are not left behind, it's really a mixture of a variety of different people. Number one, the providers of infrastructure, like the telecom companies, have to go to a whole different level of engagement in providing help and facilitating, I guess, that process. I think the government has a role to play as well, in perhaps working hand in hand with the telecom players to fill in the pain points in the infrastructure that perhaps are lacking. There's not everything that's possible for the telco companies. And then the educational institutions themselves have to go through a massive rethink. I mean, I'm sure Gemma is living this on a day-by-day basis, but teachers have not been prepared for an environment like this. There will be insecurity at the teachers' level about their ability to be relevant in an online course. I personally think they'll be far more relevant. It's just that they have to be retooled and changed, and the way they interact with the students will have to shift. And then finally, of course, there's the financial component of readjusting. Not everybody has prepared themselves in the schooling system to work from home and pay for the internet and all the rest. There needs to be, society really has to come through. And that goes back to the main point about the broader stakeholder responsibility, Coco, that I mentioned at the beginning. I think all of us have to work together to address these pain points. There is a much greater need now for a public-private engagement, and for all of us to work with other sectors to address these needs as a community. All of us in a way have to hold hands, address pain points in any way we can, and rather than work as opposing forces, see if we can address these pain points together. Inclusiveness and the people being left out is a big danger of the capitalist system we have. And I think that's why I was arguing, and I think Wilson argued about for it as well, that we have to expand, I guess, our level of responsibility to perhaps stretch out to a broader community than we've traditionally been used to in our academic training.
Thanks very much, Jaza. Gemma also touched on the different ways the group tried to get lessons to the students. I had forgotten the term correspondence courses until this morning. And I think that touches on what Jaime was saying earlier about it's not the productivity, but the flexibility and the ability to adjust. And maybe we'll come back to that a bit later on. I'll turn to Ayan now. And actually, I want Ayan and Jaza later to respond to a question from Ambetiero from Accenture. And it's a question that is also raised by people by participants like Roland Ruiz, who asks, where do we start, how and where do we start rethinking our approach to things? And Ambe asks from Accenture, could the panelists cite examples of reimagination, reinvention, whether products or services from their companies or their peers or their respective industries that have inspired or surprised them? And Ayan talked about being a life insurance company that has to spend a little bit more time than usual on health issues. So could I turn to Ayan for that?
Yes, thanks, Coco. I did mention earlier that distribution is a core part also of our business. And while we do have different channels, we have agency, we have bank assurance, but to cite a particular example on the agency side, we know that face-to-face selling is something that's very important because giving financial advice, getting really with customers and finding out their needs is something that is really done best face-to-face. And during this pandemic situation, what we've done is do virtual selling. So they may not be face-to-face, but they see each other on the screen like what we're doing right now. So I think that's one way of doing the reimagination. But also on the side of recruitment, because you know that we are looking for financial advisors. That's a continuous journey. And in the process of this kind of recruitment, we are able to do that now online. Whereas we will do, again, maybe in a hotel where we will be present the business opportunities for would-be financial advisors. Now we can do that via Zoom, and we are seeing a lot more participants in that kind of business opportunity program. And not only that, I think what it does is because we know that a lot of people have been displaced during the situation where we're in quarantine, a lot of jobs have been lost. And this is now giving a lot of people an opportunity, to try to go into being a financial advisor. So we are also expanding the net and at the same time allowing ourselves to have more opportunities to reach out to those who may be interested to do this. And in terms of the background, we're not really looking at particular credentials or skills. It's really something that I guess at the end of the day will be on the part of the person if they're really willing to go into something, because training will definitely come in. So that kind of reimagination, I think, is happening, and it's going to be a win-win, I think, not just for us, but also for those people out there who may be looking for opportunities, and maybe this is the time for them to venture into life insurance.
Thanks very much for that pitch. Jaime, you obviously oversee a whole slew of companies in different industries. If you try to look at it now and try to think about or try to remember how your different executives have started to rethink their businesses, are there any lessons there or examples that you would hold up for how others might do the same?
I think it takes, it's so hard, Coco, because we've all been used to doing things a certain way, and we've created value in our institutions by following certain formulas. And then you get hit by something like this. I think all of us have the capability to change, Coco. I think we all have the imagination to reinvent. It's just not always easy. So you take a group like our real estate group, of which Jimmy is a part of. I mean, we built a lot of bricks and mortars to cater to entrepreneurs to be able to sell their products, right? And that has worked so well for so long. That formula could change. Now, I still believe that you can really cater to the needs of that community that we've curated over the years, the tenants that basically use that physical space as a way to sell their products and services to a customer who wants it, by adjusting to this new reality in new ways. But that will need us to give them perhaps more services than they've been used to in the past. I mean, Where do we hold inventory? Do we set up logistics for them to deliver? Do we engage them and bring them into websites and do that for them? A lot of these are smaller and medium-sized institutions that have not had to think all of this through. But that's exciting at the same time. But it does need a fundamentally new way of looking. And I guess all of us as organizations, we have to look out, are the people we're working with willing to reinvent and change? Or are they stuck in a certain view of the world? I think all of us will have to assess our organizations and give a little bit more power and authority to the imaginative types, the ones who are willing to work a little bit and think outside the box. I think there's a role for everyone in an organization, but we should overweight the ones with a creative mindset, a willingness to take risk, and the willingness to fundamentally change. And if maybe they were pushed down in the past, perhaps we should elevate them at a time like this. It's a time of change. It's a time of reinvention. And we should celebrate individuals who are comfortable dealing with that uncertainty at a time like this. I think that's where organizations are going to have to shift. But people at the top will have to make calls on those kind of people and giving them more room. And organizations can get a little rigid at times. People fall into certain patterns. All of us now have to, be willing to give new license to people to work. As I said earlier, Coco, I'm not spending a lot of time on encouraging productivity. I'm spending more time in encouraging creativity and out-of-the-box thinking.
Jaime has agreed to give us a couple of minutes extension, so I'll ask this last question. It has to do with workers, Jaime. And from the get-go, I think within 1 week of the crisis, Ayala told its employees and also its contractors and contractuals they don't have to worry, at least indefinitely or for a while. Obviously, things have changed since then, and there's a clearer picture that we all have about our economic viabilities. What kind of guidance would you give to the people in this group when they have to think about, and this comes from a question by Maria Teresa Rodriguez, about retention and attrition, and what kind of employee initiatives can be put in place at this time of pandemic. Obviously, some people will lose their job, many people have lost their jobs. What kind of guidance could you give to executives when CEOs like you have to think about that kind of a question?
What a difficult question, Coco, and I don't think there's...
No,
that's okay. I don't think there's a clear-cut response. Our instinct as an institution was basically to create as much leeway as we possibly could to make sure that people's safety financially and health-wise was something they didn't have to worry about. However, you cannot go on forever. If you're in a business where revenues have come down, say, to zero, and you need an institution to survive, you may have no choice but to create some form of change or shift. We're lucky that we're a big enough group, Coco, where we have tried to create a mechanism to shift people from one area to another. And I think that is a possibility. Perhaps for the smaller institutions, we should create a pooling of expertise to be able to allow people to move from one area where perhaps the job is increasingly difficult to sustain to one where there is an opportunity. As a grouping of companies, we're able to do that through our HR community. They've gotten together and, for example, people have moved out from some traditional banking roles to the insurance space where there's been demand in our insurance group. We've been able to do some shifts and retooling there. The same thing goes for other areas, but perhaps for the smaller institutions, and perhaps there's a role for groups like FINEX and MBC and the like to maybe create hubs where we can have an exchange of information on where new jobs are being created, where old ones are disappearing, and allow some movement to take place. We are organisms that have to survive. It's a very competitive world out there. I think all of us should do whatever we can to create a buffer to support our employees. But if it's fundamentally going to make your business unviable over the medium to long term, you may have no choice but to make adjustments in the employee force past a certain point in time. And that's maybe where we all can act as a community to help each other in this preservation of jobs in one way or another.
Thanks very much, Jaime. And if that can be an initiative of the different business orgs, we'll be very happy to work with FINEX, of course, on that. With that, thanks, Jaime. And I'll turn over now to Jimmy Ismail for the closing. Jimmy?
Okay. Coco, thank you very much for ably moderating the panel discussions. We've had a lot of interesting exchange of ideas, a lot of interesting questions from the audience that fleshed out more and more the ideas, the theme that we have for today. Our guest speaker and the discussions that followed highlighted the need to reimagine the future as a means to ensure business resilience and sustainability in today's VUCA world, as they say, which is currently being further disrupted on a very massive scale by the COVID-19 pandemic. And to lead, and as Jasa pointed out earlier, to lead in the unknown under this environment, there is really a need to be sensitive to the changes that are happening as they affect our key stakeholders, which requires also very extensive research and data-driven analysis to guide the design of new business models that we have to create, improve our products and services, and enhance the level of stakeholder experience. This stakeholder-centric approach is very much aligned with the stakeholder capitalism, a popular management theory in the 50s and the 60s that focused on the needs of all constituents, not just shareholders. Spurred by recent financial crisis, alarming effects of climate change, and social challenges such as rising inequality, the movement is gathering additional steam. In fact, the World Economic Forum itself apparently updated its Davos manifesto for the first time since 1973 to more clearly state that businesses must be stewards of the environment, uphold human rights throughout their global supply chains, and pursue sustainable shareholder returns that don't sacrifice the future for the present. Using this model and mindset, our speaker highlighted 3 areas in need of reimagination. And that's rethinking how we reach our customers, the customer-centric approach, making sure that we provide to address their needs at all touch points, redesigning how we work and operate our companies, basically looking at the other elements within our other stakeholders, our supply chain, our shareholders, our employees, on how we can reimagine the way we do things and adjust to the current environment. And thirdly, revisiting and renewing our commitment to and role in society, basically looking at the broader community that we influence, that each and every decision that we make effectively has a greater impact on. And by focusing on these areas, I believe we will have the opportunity to reshape the future and take advantage of opportunities to create more value for our stakeholders and allow us to ride the growth that will be brought about by these dynamic forces and changes happening before us. So ladies and gentlemen, again, that ends our first session of our 2020 Ayala-FINEX Finance Summit. We hope you find the discussions insightful and useful, and we will keep you posted on the schedule of the second and third sessions of this 2020 summit. And at this point, I would like to thank our keynote speaker, Jaime, our panelists, Gemma, Ian, and Wilson, and our moderator, of course, Coco, for sharing with us their time and wisdom on our theme for today's summit. I would also like to thank the Ayala-FINEX Summit Committee and the Professional Development Committee of FINEX for putting this summit together, and our partner business organizations who have helped us promote this webinar to their members. And most of all, I would like to extend our heartfelt thanks to our summit sponsor and partner, Ayala Corporation, for continuing the support and for its commitment to promote the advancement of the finance profession. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Keep safe and be healthy. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.